I want to welcome everybody to the MedVR talk series. The common theme in our talks are the journey of the medical XR innovator. We might change from field to field in healthcare, from psychiatry to, in this case, surgery. But the focus remains the same. I was really delighted to see this paper by Matthias Sebold, the translation of medical AR research into clinical practice, because it's not something that we talk about enough. One of the common issues with developing for medical XR is on a timeline compared to other platforms. It's still very early, and organizations, institutions are still learning how to best develop prototypes and then develop products. So I think this is an essential talk, and I think it'll become a reference for us. I'm delighted that we have Jeff Bale, who is the UX development manager for Vicarious Surgical. He's been in the XR related and simulation business for at least 8 years at Vicarious Surgical, and before that in military simulation. As well as he co-founded one of the largest VR meetup groups in the world, the Boston VR, and he's active he's active at the MDIC, the Association of Medical Devices, which has a special interest group that's focused on XR as well. So I'm not gonna talk any more about MedXR. It's on the website. People have gotten to know us pretty well because the content of this talk is very rich, and we should get started on it. I'm going to turn things over to our moderator, Jeff. I'm looking forward to listening to this.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining us. Looking forward to moderating the panel today. I'm going to follow up the talk with just a couple questions, and then I'll get right to yours. So please use the Q&A function on Zoom, put the questions on, and I'll be curating them as we go. I just wanted to start with a quick announcement about Boston VR. Next week on April 11th, we'll be at the Brigham and Women's Hospital Digital Innovation Hub, where we are going to have a presentation entitled XR Opportunities in Pain Medicine, Lessons Learned in Training and Patient Care, with Drs. Rohan Jotwani and John E. Rubin of the New York Presbyterian Hospital and Weill Cornell Medical Center. I really encourage you, if you're in the Boston area, to come and join us. I don't believe we'll have a live stream, but hopefully there'll be a recording on YouTube later on. But it's a fantastic presentation that we're going to have from some experts on XR in pain medicine. And now on to our main event. I'd like to introduce Matthias Sebold. Matthias received his master's degree from the Technical University of Munich in 2018 in the field of mechanical engineering, with a focus on mechatronics and medical technology. He joined the ROCS team as a scientist in December 2018 and conducted his doctoral thesis under the supervision of Professor Nasir Nawab at TU Munich. Since its completion in November 2022, Matthias works as a postdoctoral researcher in the Proficiency Project. His research interests include medical deep learning, acoustic sensing, computer vision, medical augmented reality, and surgical sonification. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Matthias.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Steve and Jeff. Going to share my screen. So please let me know if you can see the slides. Now it should be, yeah.
Yeah, no, see them clearly.
All right. So yeah, thanks again for inviting me to talk today about translation of medical AR research into clinical practice. My name is Matthias Seibold. I'm a senior researcher at the Research in Orthopedic Computer Science group at Balgrist University Hospital in Zurich. Our group consists of around 30 people, and yeah, we're a research group consisting of postdocs, PhDs. We also have orthopedic surgeons in our team, which is pretty nice, and also biomedical engineers and master students. So the goal of our research group is the improvement of orthopedic treatments through computer-assisted surgery. And so we have one part of the group which is doing computer-assisted surgery research in the fields of mixed reality, but also a lot of artificial intelligence, surgical navigation, medical imaging. And part of the group is also providing KAI services in the context of 3D surgery planning and the design and manufacturing of patient-specific instruments that are used in surgery. So let us first start with a couple of definitions. So what is a medical device? According to the WHO, the World Health Organization, a medical device can be any instrument, apparatus, implement, machine, appliance, implant, reagent for in vitro use, or related article intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or in combination for a medical purpose. And there's about 2 million different types of medical devices in 7,000 categories. And what is the process of translation? So translation is the process of turning observations in the laboratory, clinic, and community into interventions that improve the health of individuals and the public, from diagnostics and therapeutics to medical procedures and behavioral changes, according to the National Institute of Health. So translation is a bidirectional process, which means that clinical discoveries and problems influence the product and method development, but also the results of the product and method development are implemented in the clinical workflows. And in this context, the term has been coined from bench to bedside and back. So here it's important to note that a lot of research projects are lost in translation, which means that many projects do not make the step from a research prototype into a successful commercial product. The translational research process usually starts with clinical or technical findings, and then these findings are the basis for the translational research process, which starts usually with a process called requirement engineering, where the technical specifications are defined and the user requirements, in our case, the requirements of the end users, the surgeons, are identified. And then the incremental and iterative process of research and development is started. Very important part here is verification and validation. And here it's important to note that that is really like an iterative and incremental research process, research and development process, which means that we can go back and forth many times from different stages and also iteratively develop a product until it's implemented as a medical device. So today's example of translation will be the surgical navigation of spinal fusion surgery. Spinal fusion surgery is performed to fuse 2 or more segments of the spine. And in this procedure, screws are driven into the pedicles of a vertebra and then connected using a rod implant that fuses together the respective segments of the spine and absorbs the forces to prevent any motion between these spine segments. So on the left side, on this slide, you can see the 3D reconstruction of a segmented human spine with pedicle screws inserted. And you can see that these pedicle screws, that they have to be driven through a pretty narrow field or a pretty narrow region, the so-called pedicle. And it's a very delicate procedure. So on the medial side, there's the spinal cord, and also on the lateral side, there are also important nerves that go to the limbs, for example, and also vessels. So there's a lot of critical structures close to the target area of operation, and the error for margin is pretty small. What makes it even more difficult is that in real surgery, the operating field looks like this. So there's soft tissues in place, there's bleeding. It's pretty hard to identify especially for an unexperienced or non-medical person like me. Like I wouldn't know where to place a pedicle screw here. And also for experienced spine surgeon, it's still challenging to identify the exact location of the target anatomy. So of course, medical imaging is used for that. And on the left side, you can see like a very like severe case of misplacement of a pedicle screw. So this is the worst case scenario that can happen. Is a screw reaching, that means like perforating into the medial side and perforating the spinal cord. So this is something that we want to avoid under all circumstances, of course. And there have been surgical navigation systems. They are on the market already. They usually consist of an optical tracking system that's an external camera that is used to track markers attached to the instrument and also the patient anatomy to provide surgical guidance based on a preoperative plan. However, these systems, they haven't been widely adopted because they require additional like registration steps. They have line of sight issues in a already crowded and hectic environment like the OR. They are like the adoption is not as wide as it was expected to be, maybe. So the goal of our research project that I'm going to showcase today as an example of translational research is the so-called HoloNavigation project that was conducted at Balgrist University Hospital. And the goal of this project was the development of an augmented reality-based medical product for the AR navigated placement of pedicle screws in spinal fusion. So why do we want to use augmented reality for this task? So what are the advantages of a novel medical product for patients, for the surgeons, and also for the healthcare system? So first of all, it's a patient-centric approach. The visualization of the relevant data takes place directly in the view of the surgeon. There's less view changes. There's an increased focus of the surgeon on the operating field. It's a surgeon-centric approach, which means that the relevant data is displayed in an egocentric fashion. Therefore, there's less cognitive load for the surgeon. And the hypothesis of the research project was that this could result in less complications, also in a reduced surgery time, and in the end, in a decreased cost. So what is the biggest challenge of translating an intraoperative technology? The biggest challenge is, of course, the operating room environment. As I said, it's a crowded and hectic environment. There's special conditions, such as lighting conditions, for example. The access to the real OR environment is definitely a limiting factor for research and development. And the most important thing is that we don't want to compromise patient treatment in any way. So the translational research process can be described as a spectrum that starts with a basic scientific discovery, and then prototypes are built. They are translated to humans. Then clinical insights are derived from that. Then the medical product is translated to patients, then to clinical practice, and finally to population health. What we're talking about today mostly is the process between like T1, like T0 to T1. And this is the proof of concept research to answer the question if there is potential to improve the status quo of treatment. And it involves research and development activities to improve the product performance and also validation and integration efforts. So the goal here is to prove the efficacy and the safety of the medical device to obtain a medical device approval, minimize the time to the patient, and make the costs affordable. To assess the readiness of a technology, the technology readiness level scale, the TRL scale, has been proposed originally by NASA and also has been applied to medical devices. It consists of 9 levels, where the first 3 levels, TRL1 to TRL3, are the early stage concept, where proof of concepts for potential products are demonstrated in a limited number of lab experiments. Then in TRL4 to 5, the prototype development takes place, where a validation is performed on tissue or organ models to show equivalency with an approved device. TRL6 corresponds to the first in-human study, where a prototype is used to demonstrate safety, efficacy, and equivalence in a operating room environment in a real surgery. Then the randomized controlled trial in TRL7, a pre-market version in larger clinical trials, usually multi-center studies, in TRL8, and the market implementation in TRL9. So we adapted these the TRL scheme to medical AR products, and here you can see an overview, but I'm going to explain every step, every TRL level in detail in the following slides. Before I do that, I also want to quickly talk about validation models that are used during the development process of a medical AR device. So these validation models come in different complexity and different abstractions of reality, but of course with increasing realism, also the effort and cost increases. So the simplest form is an in silico model, which is a computer simulation where you can already test parts of the software and algorithms, but of course it's not a good representation of reality. Then typically in vitro models are used, which are bone models, like made of plastic. So you can already kind of validate the surgical task and use real instruments, but of course it's not a good representation of the real anatomy. So the next stage are usually ex vivo animal or human cadaveric experiments, which is already a high representation of reality, but of course we don't have a living subject. There's no respiration, no perfusion. And also it's not, they usually don't take place in a real OR environment. So there's no team, there's no OR lighting conditions or OR procedure. Yeah, also in vivo animal experiments exist where respiration and perfusion is given, but it's not a human anatomy. And in our project, we also didn't use in vivo animal projects, in vivo animal trials. And then finally, the highest representation of reality is, of course, the use in real humans. the first in-human study, which is a very high representation of reality, but of course it's limited number of cases and also skill levels of surgeons performing the surgery. So in the following, I'm going to explain the individual stages of development. So TRL 1 to 3 is, as I said before, the early stage concept. So in TRL 1, usually a research idea is formulated, inspired by an unmet clinical need. For this, review against the state of the art is performed. A research proposal is written and a project plan is defined. In TRL 2, the clinical requirement engineering takes place. That means we have to collect clinical requirements, we have to define the system components, and also the technical specifications. So what we did in the HoloNavigation project is we defined a very systematic description of the open spinal fusion surgery, in the form of a so-called surgical process model, which includes all of the steps that are performed during the procedure, and also describes flow of actions and deviations from different operators. And this is a good basis for the development of a technical system. So the description of the spinal open surgery was published in this paper. Then also the technical specifications have to be defined. So in the regulatory sense, all components required to achieve the intended medical purpose are part of the medical product. That includes the AR hardware. In our case, we defined the hardware to be the Microsoft HoloLens 2, which was approved as an entertainment device, but not yet as a medical device. The software, that means the main component actually of the medical device, including the preoperative planning, the data overlay and visualization, but also the surgical instruments, including the disposable instruments such as pointers or like single-use sterilized optical markers, but also reusable instruments, like for example a drill sleeve. In TRL 3, the development of first research prototypes is done. So typically here, the incremental prototyping process starts with the goal of demonstrating key performance features of individual components of the system, and a validation with in silico and in vitro validation models. It's already important here to consider ethical, regulatory, and commercial aspects, as well as the integration into clinical workflows. So in our research project, we published a paper that demonstrated the key performance features of the individual components, including the registration, which is done using a pointing tool, a tracked pointer, that is used to digitize the surface of the target anatomy. And then iterative closest point algorithm is used to achieve a registration between the preoperative plan and the target anatomy. It also includes the instrument tracking and the surgical guidance in form of AR visualizations. Furthermore, we developed an application for augmented reality assisted rod bending in spinal surgery, where the pointing tool is used to obtain the 3D location of the screw heads, which are then connected and provide guidance for bending the rod, which is a part of the procedure which usually takes a long time. And yeah, it was shown to really decrease the times for performing spinal fusion surgery. That brings us to TRL levels 4 and 5, the prototype development. So in TRL 4, the development of the first research prototypes take place, which means that all of the components are integrated into a prototype, and a large part of the incremental refinement can take place in TRL4. This includes integration of the components as well as system-wide performance optimizations. And TRL4 prototypes, they should already be tested in a real environment. So they should be tested in terms of, for example, lighting conditions that are present in the real OR. So in this stage, we also conducted a pilot study where 160 drill pilot holes for pedicle screws were placed by 4 surgeons in synthetic vertebra models using AR guidance. And we conducted a study about the feasibility, or to assess the clinical feasibility of using augmented reality systems in the operating room. As I said before, there's challenging lighting conditions. So here you can see the tracking of the pointer tool in action. And with very high light intensity, you can see that the tracking fails to function well in the setting of a real OR. So in TRL5, usually a code freeze is performed, and the integrated prototype is evaluated in a relevant environment. That means that we conduct human cadaveric experiments that already require ethical approvals. Human cadaveric experiments are, of course, more elaborate and costly validation. And this is the current preclinical gold standard of evaluating medical devices before using them in a first-in-human study. So we conducted a human cadaveric study, a pilot study with 2 cadaveric specimens. And this study showed an improved execution of the angle alignment when compared with the freehand technique, a similar execution of entry point. And in this study, hardware instabilities were identified. So system-wide performance optimizations were done. We switched the hardware from the HoloLens 1 to HoloLens 2. The tracking was re-implemented and made more robust and stable, and the whole code base was improved. And the resulting system, so also to mention here that like this also like represents what I said before, that this is really like an incremental process, and when problems are identified, they can incrementally be solved and improved towards a final usable system. So the second iteration of the system was then evaluated on 8 cadavers in another human cadaveric study. And this study showed operator independent reliability of the augmented reality navigated pedicle screw placement and the rod bending as well. So before a system can be used in a first-in-human study, we have to, of course, assess the key performance features, as mentioned before, that are related to the clinical functions and the resulting risks of, for example, incorrect screw positioning. But we also have to ensure the basic safety, which means that we have to ensure basic safety to prevent physical hazards. That includes electrical shock, but also thermal, overheating, and mechanical hazards. And so before we moved on with the first-in-human study, we had to do extensive tests, including electromagnetic measurements, to ensure the correct functioning of the device and all components of the product in the surgical operating room. So the next part is the clinical evaluation. So after we showed the feasibility and the accuracy meets the standards, the first augmented reality navigated spine surgery was performed at Balgrist University Hospital, and there are English subtitles.
Es war die erste Operation weltweit mit holographischer Navigation in dieser Art und Weise. Und das ist an sich schon eine Challenge. Also ich hoffe, wir gehen jetzt in eine neue Ära. Wir fangen da, Schnitt, 10 Uhr 2. Der Chirurg, seine Hand wird an sich geleitet durch zusätzliche Informationen, die er visuell sieht. Die holographische Navigation erlaubt, dass Richtung von der Schraube, wie sie muss gesetzt werden, dass das gezeigt wird durch das Computersystem. Das Gute daran ist, es ist eine zusätzliche Hilfe. Das heisst, Sie haben alle anatomischen Informationen, Sie operieren so, wie wenn Sie sonst operieren würden. Es hat einfach noch eine zusätzliche Information. Und das ist das Elegante an dem System im Vergleich zu Robotern oder sonstigen Navigationen. Also Entry 1 mm, 14 Grad, 4. Zeigt grün, zeigt Go. Surgeons Feedback. Sehr gut. Palpatorisch habe ich keine Perforation. Nichts. Also so, dass ich jetzt an sich relativ großes Vertrauen habe, dass ich die Schraube setzen kann. Schraubenhalt ist gut. Hören Sie alle? Ja, Schraubenhalt auch confirmed. 5er rechts perfekt, 4er rechts perfekt. Speichern bitte. Gut, jetzt kommen wir die Phase 3. Was wir jetzt machen, jetzt haben wir die Schraube gesetzt und jetzt braucht es einen Stab, um die zu verbinden. Und es ist manchmal schwierig herauszufinden, wie lang muss der Stab sein, wie muss der Bogen sein und so weiter. Und für das tun wir auch Holographie zur Hilfe nehmen, indem wir an sich auf der Schraube Punkte setzen und dann macht es ein Hologramm vom Stab, wie er müsste aussehen. Da ist das Hologramm. Sehr schön. Da kann ich drehen. Sehr schön. Oh wow, das macht sogar Spaß. Jetzt kann ich dreidimensional an sich vergleichen mit dem Stab. So würde ich sagen, müsste perfekt sein. Jetzt schauen wir, ob das stimmt. Der Stab ist gut, siehst du? Perfekt. Das ist jetzt schon noch elegant. Muss ich nichts nachbeugen, das ist jetzt wirklich noch elegant. Die Bilanz ist 3 Jahre daran gearbeitet und froh, dass es gut gegangen ist. Vor allem für den Patienten.
Okay. So after the first in-human study has been performed, the next step are randomized controlled trials. The purpose of a randomized controlled trial is to assess the safety and the efficiency of the system on a larger patient population and to compare the new medical product with an established gold standard, which in our case is the conventional way of conducting spinal fusion surgeries. We need to have a sufficiently large patient population. So in the HoloNavigation study, a randomized controlled trial with 60 patients is currently under review at the local authorities. And yeah, as an outlook, TRL 8 and TRL 9 are the implementation into practice. That means in TRL 8, there's an assessment of the performance in routine treatment in the form of multi-center studies and a large heterogeneous patient population. And in the final stage, TRL 9, the introduction of the medical device into the global market by an industrial partner takes place. Regulatory approvals are obtained, and the assessment or the long-term effectiveness is assessed through post-market surveillance. So if you're interested in more details, feel free to ask any question. And also you can find more details in our publication about this topic in the MDPI Journal of Imaging. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thank you very much, Matthias. I'd like to encourage everyone to ask questions by going to the Q&A window in your Zoom application and just typing in your question there. I'll start us off with just a few questions. Firstly, what are the challenges with multimodal sensor fusion between a device like the HoloLens and a medical grade optical tracking system similar to the one that you showed in your presentation?
Yeah, so of course you have like there are optical tracking systems that have clinical grade accuracy. That means they have sometimes accuracies in the range of 0.1 millimeters, but they require some external hardware. There's line of sight issues. They have to be registered. So the advantage of a device that is worn by the operator is the simplicity. And of course, SLAM tracking is not as accurate as outside-in optical tracking using infrared markers. Our studies have shown that it's possible to use it even for a dedicated task, such as pedicle screw placement. Of course, this means that the surgeon doesn't move that much in the surgery environment. But yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be investigated further and also improved. Like in the medical field, HMDs, like the tracking of HMDs is also an important factor for sure.
Mm-hmm. So we're starting to get some questions now into the Q&A, so I'd like to switch to those questions. I guess some of the first ones we got were just about your contact information. I know you had it briefly on the screen. The presentation itself will be on our YouTube channel, which you can find in the other answer question, a link directly to it. But if you have a preferred contact information, and also someone asked for a copy of the presentation.
Yeah, I'm just going to post my email address here.
Perfect.
So then you can, yeah, then you can just contact me via email.
Perfect, thank you. So I guess I'd like to start with the first question we received here. Based on your experiences, how do orthopedic surgeons perceive the benefit and the challenges in HoloNavigation with augmented reality for widespread use in clinical practice?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I
Sure.
Didn't get the beginning, sorry.
Based on your experiences, how do orthopedic surgeons perceive the benefit and the challenges in HoloNavigation with augmented reality for widespread use in clinical practice?
Yeah, I think there's definitely surgeons who are more, you know, like more attracted, more also willing to use such a technology. But the intuitive, so we have like a close collaboration in our research center. It's directly located next to the orthopedic clinic, and we have a lot of interactions with the surgeons in our clinic and perform a lot of studies together. And I think a lot of people see like great potential and benefit in the technology. Of course, usability is a large topic here, that we have to design systems in a way that they can be used, and also we need to train surgeons to use these systems. It's not, I mean, every medical device, it's not that the surgeons use it the first time when they perform a surgery, but they know it before. They are trained to use the devices. And I think it's important to also do that with augmented reality and really invest in training and education.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a key to the adoption of this technology. That, of course, also technical aspects have to be improved for sure. But yeah.
Speaking of adoption, we got a couple of interesting questions that are kind of related to that, and the accessibility of the technology. So one of our attendees is asking, what is the advantage of this technology for low and middle income countries? Are there other alternatives? And another kind of similar question is, what would you need to bring this technology to regular clinical practice in an ideal scenario? So there's a lot of different levels, right? There's operating rooms in the third world, and then there's kind of more regional surgical centers that are maybe separated from the large institutions and medical schools, either by distance or technology access. So how can we really bring this technology to the entire world and benefit everybody?
Yeah, I think so first of all, spinal fusion surgery is a very delicate and complex surgery. It's not performed in every hospital, and it's really experts performing this surgery in also only for severe cases. I think there's definitely easier applications of where also the accuracy requirements are not this high, like we have it in spinal fusion surgery. So that's one important part, and I think it's also there, like for the adoption of AR, also applications can be identified where the current level of technology is actually sufficient. For example, like one use case might be, for example, tumor resection, where you are resecting a tumor in a zone, right? You also resect more tissue outside of the tumor to be sure to get everything, and so there's kind of like a margin, which you don't have so much in pedicle screw placement, because it's the channel is very, very small. But also regarding the technology itself, like the Microsoft HoloLens is definitely cheaper than a surgical navigation system, for sure. Also, it doesn't have the accuracies of a high-tech system, or like a not high-tech system, but like a medical grade system that has been optimized for the task of surgical navigation, right? So but I think there's definitely a lot of potential in augmented reality, also for less developed institutions and countries, for sure. And also in terms of medical education, and for aspects such as teleconsultation.
So another member has asked, what are the challenges you observed during clinical trial versus cadaver study? And I can only imagine that like the breathing and the natural movements of a live human must make the tracking a little bit more challenging. I'm reminded of seeing a demonstration here in Boston of a system called the CyberKnife, which is directing a beam of radiation as a live patient is breathing. But I'm imagining there's a lot of other challenges, including, just there not being any blood pressure or bodily fluids in a cadaver. But what are some of the other challenges that you might have seen between a cadaver study and a clinical?
Yeah, I think like the cadaver study you're in a controlled environment, you're in the lab, you have time. If something goes wrong, you do it again, right? With a patient, you can't afford that. Like when you go to the patient, you have to be sure that it works. Like you can't test stuff with real patients. It's not possible. It's a really different. So this is why this is the current clinical gold standard to do it this way. So like cadavers can be used to when you already have a working prototype, because it's also costly, and also there's of course like ethical considerations that you shouldn't just test stuff on cadavers, but it's still like a living human is, of course, it's a totally different story, and yeah, you have to optimize everything towards using the system in a real operating room. So like it's way more challenging.
And I have a personal question. I realize you're not a surgeon, but did you have the opportunity to be in the room for the first in-human application of this technology?
No, no, I wasn't there. But yeah, I mean, I attended a couple of conventional surgeries in other research projects, and yeah, it's impressive to see.
I heard what the surgeon said in the video about like this being the first time the technology was employed, and this must have been a really amazing moment to be in that room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah. Next, we have a question. Is this primarily a training and assistance tool for novice surgeons, or is it for experts as well?
So this tool, so in the HoloNavigation project, this was intended to be used by experts. It's not a training application. We're also currently, I'm working in a project called Proficiency, where we are using augmented reality, or like adaptive augmented reality guidance for surgical training, which is also very interesting, and there's a lot of things that you can do. But the purpose of the HoloNavigation project was really to show the potential of the technology for surgical navigation in a high precision surgical task.
Okay. Next we have, how is the expected rod curve detected? Is it by tracking the tool and then with the extrapolation to the screw position? And I guess I'd follow on with that. In addition to detecting the rod curve, is there any detection of the actual alignment of the model with the real metal?
So yeah, so this was actually, it's kind of like the simplest version that has been used in the first in-human study. So we use a pointer tool to obtain the, so we track the tip of the tool, we obtain the positions of the screw heads, and we use that to fit a curve to the landmarks. And then this is simply displayed to as a guidance to bend the rod, because how it's conventionally done is that they bend the rod, they turn around, hold it into the patient, see if it fits, then go back, bend again, turn around, do it again. And this is the this was the idea of really like kind of streamlining the process of rod bending. In the meantime, like our research group has also developed this idea further. We also published a couple of papers in this line where we used like a object detector and a stereo neural network to automatically detect the screw positions and triangulate them into 3D space, to automatically like estimate the shape of the rod. And there's also been a work including augmented reality guided bending instructions to kind of like shorten the period of rebending maneuvers so that you would already get the exact instructions of using the bending bench to streamline this. But this has not been included in the, and we're currently still working partly on this topic, but it has not been included in the HoloNavigation first in human study because yeah, like all of these components have to be tested, and then, as I said, in TRL5 usually a code freeze is performed, so the system is defined and really tested before it can be moved to a use in real surgery.
Next, have you observed individual differences in performance among users, since individual differences in spatial reasoning skills exist? Or do you think this technology might actually reduce performance differences among surgeons by supporting or augmenting the key cognitive processes? And is there any research on this?
So yeah, this was what we proved in the second human cadaveric experiment. That really showed like the operator independent reliability of the system.
Mm-hmm. And next, how much does the OR lighting, especially the overhead one, impact vision-based tracking algorithms? And what should be considered when designing such algorithms during the lab stage?
So the original tracking, I mean, you can of course track like using the like IR-based, infrared-based tracking, but also RGB-based tracking, and we observed that especially the infrared cameras are really impaired by the intense lighting in the OR. So yeah, also I think the real intense light also creates a lot of reflections on the marker marker surface. So this is something that has to be taken into account when designing the tracking for such a system. But
And next, did you need to establish a very specific workflow when acquiring preoperative imaging to bring them into a specific place during the procedure? And maybe just in general, like it'd be interesting to hear about the workflow development from the very beginning. And I would imagine that this kind of happens at the very early TRL stages when you look at the existing operative workflow and then figure out at one point the technology can be introduced and what effect that might have on sterilization and other concerns. But this question is like particularly about the preoperative imaging.
Yeah, so the like the preoperative imaging usually involves a CT for spinal fusion surgery in current clinical practice. So we have a CT available. So the CT is segmented, and then the planning is performed in 3D on the segmented CT. This is also the workflow that our as what I said before, the surgical planning team that's part of our group here at Balgrist is using to design patient-specific implants, which are 3D printed guides for drilling or cutting planes or other surgical steps, that have the negative of the bone and only fit on a certain position. They can be sterilized and brought into the wound. And so this is kind of like an established and certified process for surgical planning. So we have the 3D information from the CT preoperatively, and then we need to register it intraoperatively to the patient coordinate space, which can be done in various ways. In this, so this is surface digitization, but you can also use, for example, 2D, 3D registration based on X-ray. And
certainly when you're, registering against something like the spine with a pedicle screw, you can be absolutely sure about where that is. But we had another question about what the role is of AR in tumor removal and also for C-section procedures. So these are on the inside of the body when you don't maybe necessarily have markers that are as concrete or fixed in place or literally screwed into the body. What do you think the role is of AR in those cases?
Yeah, I mean, that's I'm probably not the exact right person to answer the question because I'm working in an orthopedic hospital where we only do musculoskeletal. But of course, like soft tissue is definitely a different challenge because you can't assume rigidity, right? So you have like the registration steps you have to do some kind of deformable registration or track, somehow track the anatomy in some way. This is definitely challenging. There's, I'm aware of some works for example, for tracking of like more rigid internal organs to provide augmented reality guidance in laparoscopic views directly. For example, for minimally invasive visceral surgery. So there are methods for kind of registering and tracking also these like soft tissues. But I can only, I know research papers, but I don't know if this is actually used in some kind of product or clinical practice. I don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly a big challenge. I think we have time for just one more question. And we had one about the applications of medical AR systems in telemedicine. So I can foresee maybe a remote, surgeon being able to like look at the 3D model of that rod and verify the bend. But certainly there's a lot further you could go with telemedicine, certainly as networks improve and the technology improves. What do you think the future is with telemedicine and this application?
Yeah, I think telemedicine has a lot of potential, both in teleoperating, in robotic surgery, for example, where experts can, like control a robot, but they don't have to sit next to the robot, but they can be on the other side of the world. But also in the form of teleconsultation, where a remote expert could see a 3D reconstruction of the operating field and could maybe also provide annotations or indicate risk structures or like provide guidance in, for example, in a complicated case that in a rural hospital, there's no trained surgeon that knows how to perform it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in telemedicine that, especially with technologies such as like 5G are becoming possible, and I think that's very exciting things to come.
Yeah, and it can certainly help with that accessibility challenge and bring it to parts of the world that have never seen technology like this.
Yeah.
But Matthias, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today and for your presentation, and thank everyone who joined us for all your great questions. Please follow us on medvr.io, and also be sure to check our YouTube channel for all our previous recordings. And Steve, do you have any last words for us?
I just wanted to repeat your thanks to everybody who came and to you and Matthias. That was, from my perspective, one of the best talks we've had, because it really breaks down the workflow of innovating in this field and focuses on so much of the process that's outside of software development, that is in the acquisition and confirmation of requirements and safety testing in healthcare. I think it'll be the recording will become educational content for quite some time, where people will start their projects by watching the recording. So thank you, Jeff, for joining us and supporting us. And Matthias, thank you for a wonderful paper and a fabulous talk. In the future, we'll have to have you back to talk about acoustics and as navigation in surgery. So thank you, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
Thanks
having
very
me.
much. Cheers.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and have a nice day, everyone.
Will do.